Have you ever walked through a house that holds its breath? Not a silence of emptiness, but a quiet that feels watchful, as if the walls themselves are remembering. The portraits on them aren't just paint and canvas. They are eyes. And at Althorp House, the ancestral home of the Spencers for over 5 centuries, one pair of eyes seems to watch more intently than all the others. She was the most famous woman in the world, a princess who captured the globe's heart, not with a crown, but with a smile. And when she left this world in a storm of flashbulbs and tragedy, a single, haunting question refused to be buried with her. Did she ever really leave this place? Let's step inside. Feel the change in the air as we cross the threshold. It's cooler here, a slight chill that the ancient stone radiates, a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Smell that? It's the scent of old wood, beeswax polish, and the faint, sweet perfume of thousands of dried petals from bouquets left by grieving strangers. Now listen, beyond the hushed footsteps of the few visitors allowed in, beyond the whispered guides. What else is there? A rustle of a silk dress around a corner where no one stands? A soft, familiar laugh that seemed to echo down from an empty upper floor? This is the world we're entering. A world of stories told in nervous whispers by those who know this house best. The staff, the people who sweep its floors, who polish its silver, who lock its doors at night. They are the guardians of its secrets, and some of them are afraid. Our story doesn't begin with a ghost. It begins with a girl, a young Diana Spencer, running through these very hallways, her laughter bouncing off the stern portraits of her ancestors. She played in the vast gardens, hid in the sprawling attic, and dreamed her dreams in a bedroom overlooking the park. This wasn't just a stately home. It was her sanctuary, her one true constant in a life that was about to be hurled into a dizzying and often cruel spotlight. She loved Althorp. She called it her ultimate haven. So, if a spirit were to yearn for peace, for a place of comfort and childhood safety, where else would it go? But not everyone believes that. Skeptics will tell you it's grief playing tricks on the mind, that the weight of history in a place like this is enough to make anyone imagine things. They say the cold spots are just drafts from ill-fitting windows that are 500 years old, the whispers of the wind in the chimneys. The feeling of being watched is just the pressure of so much past in one place. It's a logical, sensible explanation, but logic and sense often vanish in the dark, in a quiet corridor when you're all alone. Take Sarah, for instance, a former housemaid who agreed to tell her story only if we change her name. It was the mid-2000s, long after the world had mourned, but the house was still deep in its own private sorrow. Sarah's job was to clean the west drawing room in the early mornings, before the first tours arrived. It's a magnificent room, filled with priceless art and delicate furniture, but it always felt different, colder than the others, despite the sun pouring through the windows. One Tuesday, she was alone, carefully dusting a grand piano. The house was utterly silent, and then a scent washed over her. Not the smell of polish or dust. This was something vivid and alive. It was a distinct, unmistakable fragrance of Quelques Fleurs, the favorite perfume of Princess Diana. Sarah stopped, confused. The scent was powerful, as if someone had just walked past her wearing it. But the room was empty. She shook her head, putting it down to her imagination, and went back to work. A moment later, from the corner of her eye, she saw a flash of movement, a figure gliding past the doorway into the hall. A woman, tall and graceful, wearing a simple blue dress. Sarah assumed it was an early tourist who had somehow wandered in, though the doors were still locked. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping into the hallway. The house isn't open yet. The hallway was empty, long and perfectly empty. There were no footsteps, no sound of a door opening or closing, just that lingering trace of Quelques Fleurs. A chill, completely separate from the morning air, crawled up her spine. She told the head housekeeper, who simply nodded, patted her arm, and said, "You've met our resident spirit, dear. She's harmless, just checking on things. It wasn't a surprise to them. It was a fact of life at Althorp. Then there's a library, a room of dark leather and towering bookshelves, a room of quiet intellect, a security guard. A man named Michael, not given flights of fancy, was doing his final rounds one night. His flashlight beam cut to the profound darkness. All was as it should be. As he turned to leave, a soft sound made him freeze. It was the sound of pages turning, not a frantic rustle, but the slow, deliberate turn of a page in a heavy book. He swung his light toward the sound, toward a large reading desk in the center of the room. The beam illuminated the desk, and on it, bathed in the electric light, was an open book. As he watched, frozen in place, another page slowly lifted, as if by an invisible hand, and turned over, settling with a soft whisper onto the other side. The air grew icy. Michael didn't wait. He backed out of the room, locked the door, and noted in his logbook simply, "Library disturbance." He didn't need to say more. They knew, but these are just feelings, sounds. What about something you can see? What about a moment so clear, so undeniable, it leaves no room for doubt? That story comes from the grounds, from the island, the place where Princess Diana is actually buried. Her final resting place is on a tranquil island in the middle of that round oval lake, a place of supreme peace, surrounded by swans and beautiful memorials. Access is strictly forbidden to everyone, a rule fiercely enforced to protect the family's privacy and her peace. Yet multiple staff members, gardeners working at dawn, and even the state manager have reported the same chilling sight. In the early morning mist that rises off the water, they have seen a figure, a lone woman, walking slowly amongst the trees on the island. She is tall, slender, with a familiar grace in her step. She is always described as wearing a long, white gown or dress, and her head is often bowed, as if in quiet contemplation. She never looks up. She never acknowledges the living world across the water. She simply walks, a solitary, sorrowful spirit in her own sacred garden. They see her and they know it is her, and they turn away, giving her the privacy and death that she so desperately craved in life. So is it her? Is a love for her home, her ultimate haven, so powerful that it tethered her spirit to these stones and gardens? Or are these stories just the echoes of our own collective grief, a desperate need to believe that a light that bright couldn't possibly be extinguished? The staff at Althorp, the people who hear the whispers and feel the chills every day, they have their answer. They live with it. But the story doesn't end in the gardens. The most intense encounters, the ones that truly freeze the blood, don't happen outside. They happen upstairs, in the private quarters. In the very bedroom where young Diana Spencer once slept, dreamed, and grew up. That is where the feeling of being watched becomes unbearable. That is where the temperature doesn't just drop, it plummets. And that is a story for next time. Last time, we walked the halls of Althorp. We stood on the shores of the lake and felt a presence watching from the island. We heard the stories from below stairs, the phantom perfume, the turning pages in the library. But these were glimpses, flickers at the edge of vision. To truly understand a haunting, you must go to its heart. You must go to the place where the memory is the strongest, where the emotional anchor is sunk deepest into the foundations of a life. For Diana, that place wasn't a palace. It was a bedroom on the first floor, her childhood room. This is where a shy young girl, known to her family as Dutch, stared out at the sprawling Northamptonshire countryside and wondered what her future held. She could never have imagined the unimaginable fame and tragedy that awaited her. This room is the quiet, simple beginning of an epic story, and many believe it is also where her spirit feels most at home and most active. The staff who clean this room talk about it in hushed tones. They have a routine, a way of doing things that feels almost respectful, like tending a shrine. They say the room has a mood. Some days it feels light, almost cheerful, as if the memory within the walls is a happy one. The sun seems to shine brighter through the windows. But other days, Other days, a profound sadness hangs in the air, a weight that is almost physical. On those days, the room is cold, not just a little chilly. A deep, penetrating cold that seems to seep from the very walls, a cold that no amount of sunlight can ever seem to warm. A former junior housekeeper, let's call her Emma, was tasked with cleaning the room one overcast autumn afternoon. She was new and still skeptical of the stories the older staff told. She was dusting the mantelpiece when she felt it, a sudden, drastic drop in temperature that made the hairs on her arms stand up. It was localized, a perfect, invisible circle of cold centered right behind her. And then, a sensation she would never forget, the unmistakable feeling of someone gently brushing past her, the faintest whisper of fabric against her leg. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. The room was empty, but the cold spot remained for a full minute before slowly fading, leaving her shaken and finally a believer. But what if the spirit isn't confined to just remembering? What if it seeks connection? This story comes from a retired groundskeeper, a man named Bill with rough hands and a no-nonsense attitude. Not the sort to imagine things. He was repairing a section of fence near the house late, one evening, the sky a deep twilight purple. As he gathered his tools, he glanced up at the window of Diana's old bedroom, and he saw her. Not a misty figure, not a trick of the light. He saw a woman, clear as day, standing at the window, looking out. She had blonde hair and was wearing a light-colored sweater. She seemed sad, pensive. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Stunned, Bill blinked, and when he looked again, the window was dark and empty. He reported it, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. He described her exactly. It was a perfect match for how Diana often looked during her quieter, more reflective moments at home. These encounters are one thing, but then there are the stories that suggest something more than a mere echo is residing in Althorp, something with awareness, something that interacts. There is a particular hallway on the first floor, leading to the private family quarters, that is notorious among the staff. It's a long, carpeted corridor lined with more of those solemn family portraits. Many refuse to walk it alone after dark. The feeling of being watched here is overwhelming, not just from one portrait, but from all of them at once. Security guards doing their nightly sweeps have reported their flashlights flickering for no reason as they walk this corridor. Others have heard the clear sound of soft, hurried footsteps behind them, footsteps that stop the instant they turn around. The most chilling account from this hallway came from a night watchman a few years ago. He was a big, burly man, ex-military, the last person you'd expect to be frightened of the dark. He was making his rounds, his boots silent on the thick runner carpet. As he passed a portrait of a stern-looking Spencer ancestor, he heard a voice, not a loud, dramatic wail, just a whisper, so close it seemed to be right by his ear. A woman's voice, clear and unmistakable, sighing a single, sorrow-laden word. Why? He froze, his blood running cold. The word hung in the air, a question filled with an ocean of pain. He was alone. The hallway was sealed. There was no one there to have spoken. He finished his round faster than ever before, the echo of that lonely, heartbreaking question following him all the way. A whisper, a cold spot, a figure at a window. Are these just random events, or do they form a pattern? Is this the spirit of a princess, forever trapped replaying the moments of her life? Or is it something else? A residual energy, like a recording on a loop, imprinted on the very fabric of the house by intense emotion? The skeptics would say, yes, it's just energy. It means nothing. But then how do you explain the clocks? It is a well-documented fact, spoken by multiple staff members and even mentioned in hushed tones by visitors, that the clocks at Althorp behave strangely, especially on a significant date. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, August 31st, clocks throughout the house are said to stop. Not all of them, and not always at the same time, but reliably, year after year, at least one or two antique clocks, ones that have been perfectly maintained and kept wound, will simply stop. They stop ticking. The hands freeze, as if time itself cannot move forward on that day, as if the house itself is holding its breath, remembering the exact moment the world stopped for Diana. Is that a coincidence? A series of mechanical failures that just happened to align with the calendar? Or is it a sign, a message from something that remains, something that remembers the pain of that Paris tunnel and refuses to let the world forget? The evidence mounts. The stories weave together, from the gardens to the library, from the drawing room to the bedroom hallway. They paint a picture not of a violent, angry spirit, but of a sad, restless one, a presence tied to love, to loss, and to a deep, unanswerable question. But we have yet to enter the most private space of all, the inner sanctum, the place where the line between past and present doesn't just blur, it vanishes completely. This is where the most personal and most terrifying encounters occur. This is where you don't just see a ghost, you feel her grief. And that is a story that must be told on its own. We followed the trail from the sun-dappled gardens to the sorrowful island. We felt the chill in her childhood bedroom and heard the whisper in the hall. But to truly know if a spirit remains, you must go to the place it would most want to be. For Diana, that wasn't a room of state or a grand gallery. It was a place of family, the private sitting room, a room of soft sofas, family photographs, and well-loved books, a room that, by all accounts, was her favorite place in the entire world to simply be herself. If any part of her lingers, it would be here, in this cozy, intimate space that felt the most like her. The staff tell a story about this room that is less about fear and more about a profound, aching sadness. It's a story they don't share with the public, a story kept within the trusted family of those who run Althorp. It involves one of the most senior members of the household staff, a woman who had been there since Diana was a girl. She had known the princess her whole life, had watched her grow, had shared in her joys and her heartbreaks. One evening, long after the last visitor had gone, this woman was doing a final check of the private apartments. She entered the sitting room to draw the curtains against the falling night. The room was dark, lit only by the last embers of fire dying in the grate. And that's when she saw her, Diana. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the sofa, her knees drawn up to her chest. She was bathed in the faint, flickering orange light, and she was crying, not loud, hysterical sobs, but the quiet, hopeless weeping of someone whose heart is utterly broken. The figure was solid, real. The staff member stood frozen, not with terror, but with an overwhelming wave of compassion and grief. She took an involuntary step forward, her instinct to comfort the woman she had cared for so long. As she moved, the figure slowly turned its head. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the staff member said she saw not a scary apparition, but a depth of pain and confusion so raw it was almost unbearable. It was Diana, but it was a Diana trapped in a moment of pure, unadulterated sorrow. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure faded, not vanishing with a pop, but dissolving like mist in the suddenly cold air of the room, leaving behind only the faint, familiar scent of Quelques Fleurs and the sound of a single, final sob echoing in the silence. This encounter changes everything. This isn't a cold spot or a flickering light. This is emotion. This is a spirit not just repeating an action, but seemingly trapped in a feeling. A moment of pain so powerful it etched itself into the very soul of the room. So, we are left with the ultimate challenging question, the one that forces us to look at all we've learned and decide for ourselves. What are we really witnessing at Althorp House? Is it the conscious, earthbound ghost of Princess Diana, a spirit who, out of love for her home or confusion from sudden death, returned to the place she loved most? Is she aware, watching her sons grow up from beyond the veil, weeping for the grandchildren she never got a hold? Is that her, walking the island, looking from her window, seeking comfort in her favorite room? It's a comforting thought in a way. It means she's still here. She's still somewhere. Or is the truth something even stranger and perhaps sadder? Are these apparitions, these whispers, these cold feelings, not a spirit at all, but something science is only beginning to understand? A a psychic recording, a ripple in time. The theory is that intense emotion, searing grief, overwhelming joy, dramatic shock, can act like a lightning strike, impressing itself onto a location. The stone, the wood, the very air absorbs the energy of that moment and occasionally, under the right conditions, plays it back, like an old record forever skipping on the same sad note. If that's true, then the woman crying in the sitting room isn't Diana's spirit. It's an echo, a photograph made of energy, replaying a moment of profound sadness she once experienced in that room. The figure at the window isn't looking at us. It's just an image, a leftover piece of a past day. The whisper of why isn't a question for us, but the ghost of a question she once asked herself, forever trapped in that hallway. This means she isn't trapped. She isn't sad or lonely. Her soul, her essence, has moved on to a place of peace. What remains is not her, but the shadow of her pain, imprinted on her home like a scar. This idea is both heartbreaking and a relief. Heartbreaking to think a place so full of her happy childhood is also stained with such sorrow. A relief to think that the princess herself is finally, truly at rest. So which story do you believe? Is Althorp House a vessel for a soul or museum for a memory? The evidence is all there. The stories from the staff are too consistent, too heartfelt to be easily dismissed. They believe they have met her. They feel her presence as a fact of their daily lives. Perhaps the answer isn't one or the other. Perhaps it's both. Love is a powerful force. Grief is a powerful force. Maybe they can combine to create something that lingers, something that defies our simple explanations. A presence that is both an echo and a spirit, a memory and a consciousness, forever tied to the stones of the house she loved. The grounds of Althorp are quiet now. The moon reflects on the oval lake. The windows are dark, but walk those halls and you'll feel it. A watchful peace, a beautiful sadness, a love that was so strong, not even death could completely contain it. The story of Princess Diana, Ghost, isn't a horror story. It's a love story. And like all great love stories, it lasts long after the final page is turned. What do you think? Is she there, or is it just a trick of the heart? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you felt a chill watching this, share this story with someone who loves a good mystery. And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the unexplained. Until next time, keep wondering.